Have you ever signed a check thinking it would heal a wound, only to realize it was a blade handed to your back? I'm Emily, and I paid off my parents' mortgage, $244,000, hoping to finally earn their love. But instead of gratitude, I got silence and a new car in my sister's name. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you're not alone. Stay with me because this story, it's not just about money. It's about the cost of being the forgotten daughter. Before we begin, drop a comment if you've ever been guilted into giving more than you should. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories that will have you questioning everything you thought you knew about family. I knew something was off the moment I stepped through the door. The smell hit me first, baked apples and cinnamon like every holiday from my childhood. It should have been comforting, but instead it clung to the air like a trap. Too sweet, too staged. And then there was Charlotte, my younger sister, perched on the edge of the couch like a guest instead of family, arms crossed, eyes cold. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when Dad handed me the envelope. "We need a little help," he said gently, almost apologetically, like he was asking me to pass the salt instead of hand over nearly $250,000. "Just to keep the house, the bank's pressing. If we lose it, this place, your mom, it'll break her." The words were soaked in guilt. Familiar, practiced. My mother sat beside him, nodding solemnly, her hands clasped like she was praying I'd say yes. Charlotte didn't say a word. The paper inside the envelope was a mortgage invoice. Final amount due, $244,000, due in full. I stared at the numbers, feeling my throat close. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. This is everything." "We didn't want to burden you," Mom whispered, a tear conveniently sliding down her cheek. "You've always been the strong one, Em." That sentence had followed me since I was 12. I looked around the living room, same walls, same dusty shelf with our childhood photos, only most of them were Charlotte's solo. Her dance recitals, her honor chords. Not a single photo of my college graduation. I'd noticed it years ago and told myself it didn't matter. But it did. Still, I wanted to believe them, that this was real, that I was needed. That maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of repairing decades of small, silent slights. So I asked them to give me a minute alone. In my old bedroom, now a mismatched guest room, I stared at my reflection in the mirror over my childhood dresser. I thought about my condo, about the late nights and skipped vacations and extra freelance hours I had taken on to get where I was. Was I really about to give that all away? I heard their muffled voices in the living room. I couldn't catch the words, but the tone, it wasn't desperation. It was expectation, assumption. Still, I returned, checkbook in hand. My hands trembled as I filled it out. "I'm doing this because I want to believe we can be close again," I said quietly as I tore the check free. "Because I want to come home without it feeling like I don't belong here." They smiled, thanked me. My mother hugged me with the kind of gratitude that felt just a little too rehearsed. Charlotte, she looked away, said nothing. As I left that evening, the porch light flickered above me like it was thinking twice about staying on. And deep down, so was I, because I had just written a check to save my family's home. But what if it had never been my home at all? That night, after handing over the check, I couldn't sleep. Back in my city apartment, high above the hum of traffic and distant sirens, everything felt too still. My phone buzzed once. Dad had texted, "Thanks again, sweetheart. You've really saved us." No heart emoji. No, "we love you." Just a transactional pat on the back. I didn't reply. Instead, I wandered into the spare room I'd turned into a study and found the old cardboard box I hadn't touched in years. The one marked "Home" in faded black Sharpie. Inside were old family photo albums, a few trophies from middle school spelling bees, and a stack of dusty DVDs I'd digitized years ago but couldn't bring myself to delete. I slid one into my laptop and hit play. There it was, my 8th birthday party. I watched as a younger version of me, gap-toothed and grinning, held out a glittery pink cake toward the camera. But the frame wasn't centered on me. It was focused slightly to the right on Charlotte. She was 3 at the time, tugging at the ribbon in her hair, already used to being filmed like the star of a show. Mom's voice was off-screen, gushing. "Look at Charlotte! Oh, she's just precious." I was singing. No one noticed. Another video began. Christmas morning, 1999. I tore open a box of science kits I'd been begging for. I remembered that day, the way I jumped up and down, already imagining the volcano I'd build. But the camera panned past me before I even finished unwrapping it, zooming in instead on Charlotte squealing over a plastic pony set. I paused the video. Why was I only just seeing it? Or had I always known? I I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed tight over my chest, watching old footage as if I were someone else's ghost. A blurry clip from my high school graduation flashed next. Mom wiping a tear as Charlotte took pictures with my cap draped over her head. "She'll be next," Dad said proudly. No one had come to my honors ceremony later that evening, and yet I'd convinced myself this was just how families worked. Some kids needed more attention. Some got it. Simple. But it wasn't simple. It was lopsided, and I'd lived bent under the weight of making peace with that imbalance. I shut the laptop and turned off the lights. The glow of the city blinked through the blinds, but I stayed in darkness. The next day, I walked into my office at Hamilton Consulting, head foggy and stomach heavy. Ava, my closest colleague, and the kind of person who always noticed too much, caught my eye immediately. "Didn't you take yesterday off to go see your family?" She asked gently, sipping her vanilla latte like it hadn't just become a red flag. I nodded. "Yeah, went home, helped them out with something big." She tilted her head. "And how'd that go?" I opened my mouth, but the words tangled. How do you tell someone you just gave away your financial safety net hoping to buy a relationship that should have already existed? "Fine," I said, then added, "Weird, but fine." Ava didn't press, but she gave me a look that said, "I don't buy it." Back at my desk, I stared at the financial dashboard I was building for a client, watching numbers populate across a sleek spreadsheet. It all looked so clean, so logical, so unlike my personal life. At lunch, I ducked into an empty conference room and texted Mom. "Hey, just wondering, do you think Charlotte's okay? She seemed distant yesterday." No response. I set the phone down and stared at the far wall. It shouldn't matter this much, I told myself. I'm 34. I pay my bills. I've built a life from scratch. I don't need their approval. But the truth, I still craved it. Not because I was weak, because I was human. Because somewhere deep inside, there was still a little girl who wanted to be seen the way Charlotte always had been, as someone worth celebrating. Later that evening, I tried calling my dad just to talk, to feel something normal between us again. He picked up after 3 rings. "Hey, Em," he said. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just wondering how Mom's doing." "And Charlotte?" He paused. "They're fine, busy." "Right," I said. "Tell them I said hi." He didn't say he would, just mumbled something about having to go and hung up. That night I made myself tea and watched one last family video. It was grainy and shaky, clearly filmed on a first-generation phone. Thanksgiving, maybe 10 years ago. Charlotte sitting at the head of the table, carving the turkey while everyone clapped. In the background, I was refilling drinks. Smiling, always smiling. But no one ever turned the camera my way. The following weekend, I went back to my parents' house for dinner. Mom had texted 2 days earlier, "Family dinner, 6 p.m., bring dessert if you can," as if nothing had happened. No acknowledgement of the check, no thank you beyond Dad's clipped text, no sign of Charlotte even existing in the group chat. Still, I baked an apple crumble. The irony didn't escape me. I brought the one thing this house always smelled like, the scent that had tricked me into thinking it was still a home. Maybe I just wanted them to know I was still trying. The moment I stepped inside, it was déjà vu. Cinnamon, laughter, and that familiar sting of not quite belonging. Charlotte was already there, seated next to Dad at the table, scrolling through her phone with one leg tucked under her. She didn't even glance up. "Hi, honey," Mom called from the kitchen. "You brought dessert. Perfect." I held up the glass dish, trying to smile. "Of course." As I walked past Charlotte, I caught her muttering something under her breath and smirking. I didn't ask. Dinner was roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, green beans, the staples of every birthday and Sunday growing up. The table looked just like it had when I was 12, except now I was older, quieter, and so much more tired. We made small talk through the salad course. "How's work, Emily?" Dad asked, more out of obligation than interest. "Good," I said. "Busy," Charlotte chimed in without looking up. "That consulting firm still keeping you chained to your laptop?" I laughed politely. "Pretty much." "You always were the workaholic," she added like it was a joke. Everyone chuckled, even Mom. I swallowed a mouthful of wine. The bitterness was easier than the food. Then came the moment I'd been half dreading, half expecting. Dad turned to Charlotte and said, "Heard your car's acting up again." She rolled her eyes. "It's dying, totally undrivable. Brakes make this squealing sound like a banshee every time I stop." "Oh no," Mom said. "You've had such bad luck with cars." "Some people are just cursed," Charlotte said and winked. "You've always been so responsible, though," Mom added, looking right at her. "You'll figure it out." I blinked. That word, responsible, burned in my ears. After everything I'd done. After signing a check for $244,000 less than 2 weeks ago, I looked at my plate. I hadn't touched the potatoes. "You need anything to drink, Emily?" Dad asked suddenly, noticing my empty glass. I nodded. "Another splash of wine would be great." He poured without ceremony and passed the bottle without eye contact. We moved on to dessert, and I carefully set the apple crumble in the center of the table. Mom gave a theatrical ooh and started dishing it out. Smells amazing," she said. "Just like old times." "Emily made it," I said, soft. "Oh, did you?" she asked, surprised. I nodded. "You asked me to bring something." "Oh, right, well, it's perfect." Charlotte took a bite and shrugged. "Needs more sugar." I almost laughed. Of course, we sat in silence for a while, chewing through thick air. Then, out of nowhere, Dad turned to Charlotte and said, "So any news on grad school apps?" She lit up. "Yes, I heard back from state. I got in." Mom gasped, clapping. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. We should celebrate." "Yeah," Charlotte said. "I'll need a better car if I'm commuting next semester." I froze. There it was. The setup. The reason I was here wasn't dinner. It was the same thing it had always been. I was the silent sponsor, the convenient older sister whose generosity no one acknowledged but everyone counted on. I waited. Not for thanks, I had given up on that, but maybe just a nod. A glance. Some recognition that the mortgage had been paid. That the house we were sitting in wouldn't exist for Charlotte to commute from if not for me. But nothing came. They laughed about the car. About how unlucky she was. About dealership options. And I sat there, sister, daughter, financier, with a bite of lukewarm apple crumble dissolving bitterly on my tongue. That night, driving home alone, the city lights blurred through my windshield. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. It wasn't the money. It was the silence. Not the kind that fills a quiet house. The kind that surrounds a person until they wonder if they were ever really seen. It was a Tuesday when the lie found me. I'd stayed late at the office, knee-deep in quarterly analytics and sipping cold coffee from a paper cup. Ava had just wrapped a presentation and plopped into the chair beside mine, swinging her legs like a kid on a school bench. She was always light after big meetings, her version of a post-performance high. "You want to see something insane?" she asked, pulling out her phone. I glanced at her over the rim of my coffee cup, grateful for any excuse to take a break. Always. She tapped and swiped, then angled the screen toward me. "Tell me this isn't the most look-at-me thing you've seen all week." I leaned in. It was Charlotte, posing beside a shiny new Audi SUV. Lip gloss perfect, hair like a shampoo commercial. A ribbon, yes, an actual pink bow wrapped across the hood. The caption read, "Early Daughter's Day gift from the best parents ever. Spoiled grateful, bless." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. For a second, I couldn't breathe. "Emily." Ava's voice softened. "Wait, is that your sister?" I nodded slowly, my eyes locked on the photo. There were already over 100 likes. Comment after comment from her friends. "Girl, you deserve it. Your fam is goals. This is why you're the favorite." Lol. I stared at the image like it might change if I blinked hard enough. "That's a brand new Audi," Ava said, her voice now edged with disbelief. "Didn't she just crash her other car?" "Last month," I said, numb. "Wait," she continued cautiously. "Your parents say they couldn't afford their mortgage." My silence said everything. Ava blinked. "Emily, you gave them money, didn't you?" I could feel the tears rising, sharp, hot, angry. I turned my chair slightly to shield my face from passing coworkers. "I paid off their mortgage," I whispered. $244,000. Ava's eyes widened. "What?" I nodded, swallowing the burn in my throat. "They told me they'd lose the house. Said it was the only thing holding our family together." Her mouth opened, then closed. "And then they bought her a luxury car," I exhaled shakily. "Apparently for Daughter's Day." "What even is Daughter's Day?" she snapped, her voice too loud. "You don't buy a new Audi unless you've got 6 figures in disposable income. That's not a thanks for being cute gift, that's hush money." I looked at the screen again. Charlotte beamed back, completely unaware her secret had landed like a knife between my ribs. It hit me then. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal. All those moments, the dinner, the apple crumble, the empty praise, the endless silence, hadn't been absent-minded neglect. They were a cover. A coordinated effort to keep me from knowing what they'd done with my sacrifice. Ava placed her hand over mine. "Emily, they used you. You didn't just help them, you freed them. And they turned around and rewarded her like she saved them." The words settled like stones in my chest. They used me. They lied. The ribbon on that car felt like a slap. I excused myself and took the elevator down to the lobby, needing air. I stepped outside. where the city wind stung my cheeks and traffic hummed like static. I pulled out my phone and opened Charlotte's post again. Early Daughter's Day gift from the best parents ever. I stared at those words until my hands went cold. Because the worst part wasn't even the lie. It was how easily they had all decided I didn't deserve the truth. That night, I sat in bed with my laptop open, Charlotte's post now burned into my brain. I flipped through months of social media photos, noticing things I hadn't before: her new watch, the designer bag, the spa trip. None of it added up to a family on the brink of financial collapse. And it was in that moment that something inside me shifted. No more hoping they'd do the right thing. No more second-guessing my instincts. No more being the one left out of the picture. They'd made their choices. Now it was time I started making mine. I picked the cafe because it was neutral. Not too loud, not too intimate. A place with warm scones and rustic wooden tables where small talk was expected. Somewhere they couldn't raise their voices without looking unhinged. Somewhere I wouldn't feel completely cornered. When Mom and Dad arrived, the door jingled lightly behind them, and for a split second, I wondered if they'd feel the shift in me. If they'd sense that I wasn't the same Emily who handed over a check in their hallway 2 weeks ago. But no, they greeted me like always, Dad with a tired smile, Mom in a pastel cardigan holding a to-go cup like it was a prop in her performance of worried but elegant mother. I didn't stand, didn't smile. They sat. "So good to see you, sweetheart," Mom said, reaching across the table to lightly touch my hand. I didn't flinch, but I didn't grip back. "I thought we should talk," I said calmly, "about Charlotte's car." They exchanged a glance, a short, practiced flicker. Mom exhaled. "Emily, where did the money come from?" I asked, cutting gently through her sigh. "For the car." Dad cleared his throat and reached for the sugar. "It wasn't that expensive. She posted it online. It's an Audi. That model starts at 50 grand. Mom forced a smile. "Honey, Charlotte needed something reliable. She's starting university again, and her old car was a death trap." I nodded. "And you thought the best solution was to buy her a luxury SUV, weeks after telling me you couldn't afford your own mortgage." Silence. I let the question sit. Let it breathe. Dad finally spoke, voice low. "Look, you helped us through a tough spot and we're grateful, but Charlotte's younger. She's still getting her life started. It's only fair. Only fair." The words echoed like someone had banged a spoon against the side of my chest. "You said you needed help to keep the house," I said, my voice still calm but cooler. "You never mentioned anything about using the money for Charlotte." "It wasn't like that," Mom said quickly, her voice light but firm, like she was trying to end a mild disagreement about curtain fabric. "We used the funds exactly as we said. The house is safe now. That's something we all benefit from." "Do we?" I asked. Because the last time I came over, I felt like a stranger at my own family's dinner table. And now I find out the person who didn't say a word to me that night drove away in a car my money made possible. Dad leaned forward. "It's not about repayment. You offered to help." "I did," I nodded. "I helped, but you didn't tell me the truth." Mom bristled. "Emily, we didn't lie. We just didn't go into every detail. Charlotte needed support too. You know how hard things have been for her lately." "She's always had your support," I said. "She's had your attention, your praise, your excuses. What she hasn't had is accountability, and what I haven't had ever is fairness." That silenced them more effectively than a scream ever could. I stirred my untouched coffee. "When you asked for help, I thought maybe this was a chance to fix things, to be seen, to finally matter as much as she does." Mom's face crumpled into soft guilt. "Don't say that." "Why not?" "It's true, you didn't even say thank you." "We did," Dad protested weakly. "You said you really saved us." "That's not thanks, that's relief. You were grateful to avoid the consequences, not to me." A couple seated nearby glanced over, then quickly looked away. I lowered my voice. "I'm not angry you helped Charlotte. I'm angry you did it with my sacrifice, and then acted like it wasn't a sacrifice at all." Mom reached for her cup, her hand trembling slightly. "You're making this so dramatic, Emily." No, I wasn't. I was making it real." "Do you understand what you've done?" I asked, looking at both of them now. "You took money I worked for, money I gave in good faith, and used it to reward the very person who refuses to acknowledge me." "She's your sister," Dad said, like that word was supposed to cleanse every wound. "She's never treated me like one," I replied. "And neither have you." The silence that followed was long and brittle. I stood. "I wanted to give you a chance to be honest with me, but I guess I got my answer." Dad looked up, his face suddenly older. "Emily, wait, let's talk this through." "I think we just did," I said. I placed a 20 on the table to cover the coffee I hadn't touched and walked out. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. Or maybe I was just thawing for the first time in years. The silence in my apartment that evening was no longer peaceful. It was surgical. Every cabinet I opened, every drawer I searched felt like dissecting a past I had tried so hard to believe was real. After the cafe, there was no going back. I couldn't rely on my memory anymore. I needed proof, not for anyone else's sake, but my own. I needed to know just how deep the lie had gone. I started with my email archives. Receipts, bank statements, PDF attachments, years of them. I filtered by keywords. Mortgage, payment, wire transfer. First hit was from 2 years ago. A subject line from Dad. Just temporary, will return by spring. I clicked it. We're falling behind on the loan again. We just need to catch up for a couple of months. I'll pay you back as soon as we get things settled. This won't be like last time, I promise. Love you. I remembered this. I had sent him $8,000 from my emergency fund. No formal agreement. No questions asked. I never saw that money again. And won't be like last time. What was the last time? I dug deeper. A PayPal transaction from 3 years ago. $1,400. Labeled. Charlotte tuition balance. I sat back, staring at the screen, breath slow and shallow. I hadn't remembered that one. I'd probably told myself she needed help and I was the only one who could give it. There were dozens more. Grocery bills that Mom had said were a bit tight this month. Gas money for Charlotte when she had interviews. My Venmo history looked like a donor board. How had I missed it? Or worse, why had I let it slide? I opened a folder I rarely touched. My scanned tax documents. At the bottom was a faded scan of a notarized letter I'd written 2 years ago, allowing my dad access to a co-signed line of credit. I had completely forgotten about it. At the time, he'd told me it was just to help with refinancing. I'd signed it while sitting at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, Charlotte arguing with someone on speakerphone in the background. I never asked how much they used. I pulled up the account. My fingers hovered as the screen loaded. Then balance used. $31,600 last payment. 6 months ago current status. Delinquent. My chest tightened. All that talk about falling behind on the mortgage, was this what they'd really been trying to cover? I leaned over my desk, fingers pressed against my temples. They hadn't just used me for one payment. They had been using me for years, quietly, strategically, and I had let them, because I wanted to believe that one day they'd look at me the way they looked at Charlotte, that I'd finally be the daughter who was enough. A soft ping broke the silence, an alert from my financial tracker. A new charge posted on the joint account I'd opened years ago with my parents, meant only for emergencies. I'd left it open out of habit. I hadn't thought to check it. $1,200 at a car detailing service. I blinked at the screen. It was for Charlotte's new Audi. Of course it was. I opened my banking app and froze the card. I should have done it years ago. I should have never trusted people who thought my effort was invisible and my money disposable. This wasn't just neglect. It was orchestration. Each dollar I gave became another silent permission slip to ignore me. I opened a blank spreadsheet and began typing. Family payments, Emily's contributions, every transfer, every gift, every forgotten favor disguised as obligation. I wasn't sure what I would do with it yet, but it was time to stop pretending it didn't exist. Hours passed. The night deepened. My screen glowed with line items and dated memories. When I finally leaned back in my chair, I felt both hollow and oddly clear. This wasn't in my head. I wasn't overreacting. They had taken and taken and taken, and then acted like I was selfish for wanting acknowledgement, for wanting truth, and I was done letting that happen. The next morning, I called Rachel. Rachel and I had gone to college together, roommates our freshman year. She was now a lawyer, sharp as glass and twice as clean-cut. We'd kept in touch mostly through Instagram likes and birthday texts, but I knew this call wouldn't be casual. She picked up on the second ring. Emily. Wow, hey. Long time. Rachel, I said, voice low. I need your help, legal help. That single sentence shifted everything. Her tone changed immediately. Tell me everything. And so I did. I told her about the check, the mortgage, the car, the financial records, the silence that followed. The string of betrayals that had built into a wall I could no longer pretend was a door. When I finished, Rachel didn't hesitate. You might be able to claim reimbursement, she said, depending on how the payments were made and what documentation you kept. At the very least, you could have a claim to equity in the home. But Emily, Yes, she paused. This is more than legal, it's personal and messy. Are you ready for what comes next? I thought about Charlotte's smug smile beside her new car, my mother's dismissive tone in the cafe, my father's shrug at the table. Yes, I said without blinking. I'm ready. Rachel met me at her apartment the next evening, and by the time I arrived, her dining table was already transformed into a legal war room. Sticky notes bloomed like petals along a corkboard behind her. Highlighters, legal pads, a laptop open to a state property law database. And in the center, my spreadsheet, printed and clipped neatly in a 3-ring binder. Her dog, Bean, a sleepy rescue mutt with crooked ears, blinked at me from his blanket on the floor. Help yourself to coffee, Rachel said without looking up from her screen. It's the strong kind, you'll need it. I nodded, oddly grateful for her matter-of-fact tone. No pity, no wide-eyed sympathy, just action. Let's start with the house, she said, flipping open the binder. The $244,000 payment, you said you wrote a check. From my personal account. I have a scanned copy and the confirmation email from the bank, I replied, handing her my laptop. She examined the screen, nodding. It's good, clean paper trail, but they didn't sign anything, right? No repayment agreement? I shook my head. They said they needed help to save the house. I trusted them. Rachel's pen paused. So they framed it as a loan verbally. That still counts for something. And what does that mean legally? If we can show that your money increased the home's equity and there was an implied agreement to repay, or even a shared understanding that it was temporary, then you could be entitled to compensation, possibly even partial ownership depending on the judge. I blinked. I could own part of their house. In theory, yes, but they'll fight that. What's more likely is we push for reimbursement under a doctrine called unjust enrichment. Basically, they benefited from your contribution without giving you anything in return, and the court doesn't like that. Unjust enrichment. Those words hit harder than I expected, like someone had finally named what I'd been feeling for years, but not just financially. In this family, I'd always been the giver, of time, of grace, of silence, and they'd always taken more than they gave. Rachel moved on. Now, about that line of credit you co-signed, she scanned the scanned document I'd brought. They've defaulted, that's bad, not just for your credit, but also for our case. It shows a pattern. She highlighted it in yellow. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching the ink spread across the page like a roadmap of regret. This, Rachel continued, tapping the spreadsheet, is what changes the narrative. Most people don't keep records this thorough. I didn't for a long time, I admitted. But I started keeping everything a couple years ago, after they asked me to cover Charlotte's moving costs. Rachel looked up. Wait, you helped her move. Paid for the truck, boxes, and a month of storage. She never paid me back. Neither did they. She leaned back in her chair. You're sitting on 6 years of informal lending, all of it documented. It's not just the money, Rachel, I whispered. It's that I thought maybe if I just kept showing up, they'd finally see me. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, They did see you, Emily. That's why they kept taking. Those words hit like a bruise I hadn't noticed until someone pressed on it. She pulled out her phone and scrolled. I'm going to draft a demand letter. Polite but firm. We'll give them 2 choices, reimburse the mortgage amount or open discussion around a partial stake in the property. Either way, we're asserting your rights. What happens if they ignore it? Then we file, she said simply. But I'm betting they won't. This letter forces them to face reality. And for people who have lived this long ignoring consequences, that'll feel like an earthquake. Bean gave a low snore as if in agreement. We spent the next 2 hours refining the letter. Rachel was surgical with her language, no bitterness, just facts, legal citations, and clear terms. It wasn't revenge, it was accountability. By the time we printed the final draft, it was nearly midnight. Rachel handed me a copy. Do you want me to send it, or do you want to deliver it yourself? She asked. I stared down at the letter in my hands. It was quiet, powerful, just like I wanted to be. I'll deliver it, I said. They should know this isn't coming from a stranger. Rachel nodded. Then make sure it's on your terms, neutral place. No drama, and keep it short. You don't owe them more explanations. As I left, she added, You're not burning bridges, Emily. You're building boundaries. There's a difference. That night, back in my apartment, I placed the letter on my kitchen counter and stared at it. It wasn't just a document. It was a line between who I had been and who I refused to be anymore. I mailed the letter on a Thursday. Certified, tracked, no chance it could be dismissed as lost in the mail. Rachel insisted on that. Control the delivery, Emily, she said. No surprises, let the facts be the surprise. It arrived at their house on Saturday morning. By Saturday afternoon, my phone started buzzing like it had something to prove. Text after text, call after call. At first, I didn't check. I'd planned a walk, a long one, through the park by the river where kids rode scooters and couples picnicked under aging oaks. But I couldn't escape the low tremble of my phone in my bag. By 3 p.m., I gave in. Mom, Emily, what is this letter? A lawsuit? Are you really threatening to take us to court? Dad, you've misunderstood everything. Call us. Don't do something you'll regret. Charlotte, wow, you really are the bitter sister now. You're destroying the family. For what money? Then came the messages in the family group chat. Mom, we gave you everything. How can you turn around and accuse us like this? You're breaking your father's heart. Charlotte, you're not a victim, Em. You're just mad I get attention. Maybe if you weren't so cold and superior all the time. I stopped reading. It wasn't just guilt. It was warfare, weaponized nostalgia, twisted words, the kind of blame that wraps itself in family photos and half-remembered birthdays to make you question your own sanity. I stood in my kitchen, staring at my phone screen as more messages poured in, screenshots from Charlotte's Instagram, her followers chiming in. She's suing her parents, what a monster. Some sisters will do anything for attention. Rich girl problems. And then the one that stopped me cold. Charlotte's crying in her room. She said she doesn't feel safe with you out there turning everything into a legal threat. You've ruined everything. That came from Mom, as if I were some dangerous stranger, a threat. The same daughter who gave up her savings to keep their roof overhead, now labeled a destroyer, a danger. I set my phone down on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink. My reflection in the kitchen window stared back, haunted and shaking. Why did it still hurt? After everything, why did it still feel like losing them meant losing something vital? Because I still wanted them to choose me, I realized. Even now, even after all this, but they wouldn't. They had made that clear, Charlotte's new car, their silence at dinner. The reshaped history they were telling themselves and anyone who would listen. To them, I was the problem because I had stopped pretending. Because I said, no more. A chime broke the silence, a new message. This one from Rachel. Saw Charlotte's post. Don't panic. This kind of noise is predictable. Let it burn itself out. You did the right thing. Attached was a screenshot of a now viral post on Charlotte's Instagram story, a tearful selfie with the caption, "My own sister wants to take my parents to court. This is what happens when love gets replaced with greed." Family first, brokenhearted, the comments were a pit of sympathy and misplaced anger. I stared at the post for a full minute, then I blocked her. Then I blocked Mom and Dad and exited the family chat for good. The silence that followed felt brutal, then surprisingly clean. That night my apartment felt different, like something had been exorcised. I folded laundry, watered the succulents on the windowsill, lit a candle, orange and clove, and let it burn until the whole place smelled like a place I had built. Not inherited, not borrowed, not shared. Mine, but the ache still lingered in small moments. Like when I found an old birthday card from Dad, one of the few he ever wrote in longhand, thanking me for being the strong one and the glue of the family. I remembered how I'd once treasured that sentence, clutched it like proof that I mattered. Now it read like a warning, the strong one, the glue, the disposable scaffolding. The next morning, I found myself sitting in front of Rachel again, eyes red, heart hollowed. "They're going nuclear," I said quietly. "I know," she said, sliding me a mug of black coffee. "That's what people do when their control slips." I thought maybe they'd understand. Rachel leaned forward. "Emily, listen to me. People like your parents, they rewrite the rules the second they realize you've stopped playing by them. You didn't betray them. You exposed the truth." I nodded, voice barely audible. "So what now?" "We wait," she said. "Give them time to respond formally. If they push back, we escalate. If they settle, we negotiate. But either way," she paused, leveling her gaze with mine, "you don't go back." And I knew she wasn't talking about the legal case. 3 days after the fallout, things went quiet. No more texts, no more stories, no more calls from concerned relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. The digital wildfire Charlotte sparked finally burned itself out, leaving only scorched versions of the truth behind. But I stayed silent, because Rachel was right. This wasn't a fight to win in public. It was a truth to protect in private. On Thursday morning, I walked into Rachel's office downtown, a sleek space with soft lighting and shelves lined with legal tomes and little touches of comfort. a framed quote that read boundaries are bridges in disguise, and a small bowl of peppermint candies next to a cactus that leaned toward the window like it had somewhere to be. Rachel handed me a manila folder. They responded, she said. I held my breath. They're not denying the payments, she continued. They claim you gifted the money without expectation, that it was voluntary, but they're not disputing the amount. I blinked. So they're admitting they took it. Yes, which gives us leverage. Their lawyer's asking if you'd consider a private settlement, no court, no record. What kind of settlement? They've proposed repayment over 10 years. Interest-free, no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just numbers. Quiet and clinical. I stared at the folder. You really still think this is about the money? Rachel folded her hands. That's their lens, yours is different, and you don't have to accept anything that doesn't feel like truth. I nodded slowly, heart calm in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Then we wait or we go forward. She smiled. I'll prepare both options. We sat for a while after that, going over what a court appearance would look like. It wasn't a trial, it was a small claims proceeding, but it still carried weight. Witnesses, evidence, dates. And truth, real, documented truth. Rachel placed a hand on the folder between us. You've got this, Em. Everything lines up. It's clean. It's clear. I exhaled. I'm not afraid of court. What are you afraid of? I looked down at my hands. That it won't change anything. Rachel was quiet a moment. Maybe not for them, but maybe it changes everything for you. That weekend, I stayed in. No social media, no emails, no distractions. I turned my attention inward, back to my apartment, my mind, my body. I deep cleaned the kitchen, reorganized the cabinets, boxed up clothes I hadn't worn in years. It felt like clearing more than clutter. It felt like clearing out a version of myself that kept folding to avoid confrontation. I played music while I worked. Nothing sad, nothing angry. Just soft piano melodies and old jazz records I'd forgotten I loved. I let them fill the corners of the space until my home felt like mine again. On Sunday, I took a walk through the neighborhood and ended up at the local flower shop. I hadn't planned to buy anything, but I left with a single pot of lavender and a small sign that read, "You're allowed to take up space." It now sits on my kitchen windowsill next to my coffee maker. It greets me every morning. The following Monday, Rachel and I reviewed the witness list. I had none. They'll probably bring character references, she said. Letters, maybe a family friend or two. I shrugged. Let them. None of those people saw what happened. None of them were in the room when I signed that check. Rachel tilted her head. What about Ava? She saw Charlotte's post. She saw your reaction. That could help. She'd do it, I said, already composing a text in my mind. She's been solid through all of this. Good. Every detail builds credibility. That night I sat with my case file on the coffee table, flipping through the pages again. The check, the payment receipts, the bank transfers, the emails, the social media screenshots. My life reduced to evidence, but not diminished. Not anymore. Because for the first time I saw the pattern not just in them, but in me. I'd spent years begging to be seen, only to realize I'd been visible all along as a utility. Now I was seeing myself, not as a resource, but as a person with limits, with rights, with a voice that didn't need to rise to be heard. The night before the court date, Rachel texted me a final checklist. Outfit, solid color, nothing flashy, voice, calm, goal, clarity, not revenge. I stared at those words until they sank deep. Clarity, not revenge. That was the line I had to walk, the edge between pain and power. The morning came with gray skies and soft rain, the kind that coated everything in silver. I dressed slowly. Navy blazer, black slacks, low heels. No jewelry except for the gold ring my grandmother had given me the year I graduated college. The one she said meant independence, even if no one else cheered for it. I packed my folder into a simple black tote. No dramatics, just the facts, just the truth. Before I left, I stood in my living room, taking in the space I had reclaimed piece by piece. This wasn't just an apartment. It was sacred ground. Mine. And I was walking out the door not to fight for that, but to honor it. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand, sweeping halls or echoing ceilings. Just pale walls, wooden benches, a judge with kind but tired eyes, and a thin veil of formality trying to mask the raw, human mess that had brought us all here. My parents sat across the aisle. Dad in a navy suit that hung looser on him than I remembered. Mom in a muted blouse, hair tucked into a careful twist. Charlotte wasn't with them. Whether they didn't want her involved or she refused to come, I didn't know. I didn't care. I kept my eyes forward, folder on my lap, heart steady. Rachel sat beside me, poised and calm. The judge called the case. What followed wasn't explosive. It wasn't dramatic. It was clinical, deliberate, like peeling wallpaper back to expose mold beneath. Rachel presented the check first, then the emails, then the Venmo records and wire transfers and credit agreements. She spoke slowly, never raising her voice, letting the facts breathe in the silence between each page turned. My father shifted often in his seat. My mother stared at her lap. They had filed no objection to the evidence. Their attorney, gray-haired, soft-spoken, made a gentle attempt to reframe the contributions as emotional support between family members and voluntary, non-repayable gifts. But then Rachel stood again. She read aloud the message Dad sent me the night I wired the $244,000. "Thanks again, sweetheart. You've really saved us." She paused. Let the words settle. "Your Honor," she said, "my client didn't save herself with that payment. She saved them, and they turned around and rewarded another child, one who contributed nothing with the spoils of her sacrifice." The judge leaned forward, tapping her pen once on the desk. "And no part of that payment was ever returned." "None," I answered. "And they purchased a vehicle for another child shortly after this payment?" "Yes," the judge nodded. "I've reviewed the documents. The financial trail is clear. While families often make informal arrangements, the scope and consequence of this contribution go far beyond what can be reasonably dismissed as a gift." Silence. She continued, "The court rules in favor of the plaintiff. The defendants are to either return the full amount contributed by Ms. Harper," she looked directly at my parents, "or grant her partial legal ownership of the property in proportion to her payment, as defined by state equity law." My mother gasped audibly. My father's hand curled into a fist on his knee. "You may choose," the judge added, "but the judgment is final." Bang of the gavel, it was over. They chose repayment. Of course they did. Sharing the house would mean sharing space with me, and they'd rather pay back every cent than have to look me in the eye again and admit what they'd done. They left without speaking to me. Outside the courthouse, Rachel hugged me. "You did it." I nodded. The wind tugged at my blazer, lifting the collar just slightly. "It doesn't feel like a victory." "It's not," she said. "It's a boundary. The victory comes later when you finally believe you deserved it." I walked home, alone, no family waiting, no celebration, just a city humming around me like it had every day I dragged myself through silence. And this time, the silence wasn't punishment. It was peace. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Charlotte returned the car. I didn't hear it happen, Rachel told me. A clerk at the dealership had confirmed it. A young woman dropped off the keys without making eye contact, said the financing had been revoked by family reasons, then walked away. No drama, no Instagram story, just the quiet surrender of a symbol she should have never received. I didn't go to witness it, but later that evening I drove past the house. Our house, the one I had once believed could hold us all together. The driveway was empty. Where the Audi used to gleam like a prize, there was now a rectangle of slightly cleaner concrete. A negative space. A silent confession. I pulled over, kept the engine running. The porch light was already on. Early evening shadows stretched across the lawn. The curtains were drawn. From the outside, the house looked unchanged. But something inside it had finally broken loose. And this time it wasn't me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there for a moment, watching the place I had once run to in times of doubt, only to learn that doubt was sometimes safer than certainty. They hadn't called since the ruling. Not even Charlotte. Not even to beg or bargain or lash out. Maybe because deep down they understood that something fundamental had shifted, something even money couldn't fix. They had lost access. Not just to my account. To me. I drove home with the windows down, letting the wind tangle in my hair like freedom. My apartment greeted me with its usual quiet. Plants thriving in corners, candles half burned on side tables, the lavender pot blooming under the kitchen window. Nothing extravagant, but everything mine. I opened the drawer by the fridge where I used to keep emergency money, the spot I'd once dipped into for them. It was empty now, but not from giving. I had moved that money into a new account last week. One with my name only. No joint access. No linked cards. No memories attached. I made tea, played soft music, sat cross-legged on the couch in pajamas I didn't feel the need to apologize for. Then I opened a fresh notebook, no past pages, no cross-outs, and wrote one sentence. No more begging to be loved in languages they refused to speak. That was it. That was the whole story. Some nights the grief still visits, not just for the money or the betrayal, but for the version of me who kept bending, hoping to be seen. The girl who brought dessert to dinners that ignored her, who watched old home videos for evidence she belonged, who mistook silence for safety. But I grieve her gently because she kept me alive long enough to become this version. The one who said no, the one who kept the receipts, the one who walked away from a house without flinching. People say family is everything, but sometimes family is a chapter you have to end in order to save the story. I don't know if they'll ever apologize. I'm not waiting for it. They still live in that house. But I live in the truth now, and it's quiet, and it's honest, and for the first time in my life, it finally feels like home.